Hello, grace and peace with you. I'm glad you're here for another lesson on liturgy. Today we are talking about peace and peacemaking and sharing of the peace that happens in our worship together. When you're sent in blessing at the end of worship, you go out and you live your life, and if you're doing consequential work, bumping up against one another, living in community life together, there is likely to be a time where you disagree. It's likely to be a moment when two folks come together and they don't particularly see eye to eye on a certain thing. And yet, in that moment, there is an opportunity for growth together to better understand where each other is coming from, perhaps confess and receive forgiveness and part in peace. That is a particular activity of peacemaking in the church. And we might do that individually. We might do that corporately. We might do that even as a country, almost. But when we come here, the peace is particular. Right at the very beginning, at the threshold of our time and place, we begin our time together with a thanksgiving for baptism or a confession and forgiveness, where we recognize that we are a part of a broken world. We are a part of an individual movement that sometimes we mess up. And we recognize that we have done that, and we have left some things undone. There are some things we are aware of, and some things we are not aware of. And we, right off the bat, confess that and receive forgiveness for that. Now, as the worship moves along from gathering to hearing the word, just at that next juncture, at that seam between the word and the meal, there's another threshold of peace. And it is the one that you might recognize as the most peaceful words of our time together. Peace be with you. And it is shared and also with you. And then we go throughout the community sharing the peace with one another. We share this even with our siblings in the Abrahamic tradition. If you go to a synagogue, you're going to hear Shabbat Shalom, sharing the peace. But particularly in the Christian tradition, this peacemaking is important. It's a part of our forgiveness with one another, our forgiveness that we receive through the waters of our baptism, and forgiveness that we receive every time we gather together in communion. Peacemaking is hard work. It comes in our order of worship right at the end of our prayers of intercession, where we gather our voices to pray with the whole world, for indeed the whole world, for those that are experiencing illness or loneliness or bereaved. And the peace becomes a covenant between us that we are indeed to go out and work for these prayers to come true in the world, that we are making a binding covenant between us, that these prayers mattered and they're important. We also recognize that these are words of peace that Christ shared with his disciples in moments of doubt or worry, in moments of revelation and understanding and recognition. The risen Christ appeared in closed rooms and declared peace to you, not something that's passive, peace be with you. Our modern language can't express fully how important and directive this action of peacemaking is by Jesus in that moment. So right at the very center of our worship, we hear these words of peace. And then, as one who stands in this tradition of proclaiming to God's gathered community about peace, each person in the gathered community then is speaking the words of Jesus to one another. It's an important time. It's not necessarily a serious time, but it's an important time to recognize the work that we're doing. Now, sometimes I like to just banter or visit with some folks, but we're going to try to reserve that for when folks are coming in and we're greeting them and like, hey, you got a haircut this week, or how is school going? How is the soccer game? We're going to try to focus that peace be with you time on the peacemaking. because it is our threshold of peace that we come to this table of forgiveness, gathered in this community, trusting that we have done our very best to make peace with one another, so we come to this table with a clean heart. And then, at the very end of the meal, when all the singing is done and it is the sending time, we go out. We go out in peace into the world to take all of this peacemaking that we've done in this place out into the world with us to once again begin that cycle of liturgy. I'm glad you're here, and I look forward to you being here in this worship gathered together or gathered together on a video. If you're with us on out in the world on the internet, drop us a line. Let us know that you are out there, and perhaps send us a peace sharing video. We'd love to hear from you. Take care.